What's up, everybody? A few days after Symbolic World Summit, I was at home and the algo fed me up a new channel with a guy talking about his experience at the Symbolic World Summit. I decided to listen through, and to my surprise, he mentioned me. He said it seemed like Christian Baxter was really connected to people there, and that wasn't quite my experience, as he had come alone to the summit, which I had also come alone to. I commented on his video and said, reach out if you want to connect. He did, and here we are. There are several real reasons why I look connected at the Symbolic World, and I wanted to give context to that. But I'm also interested in this young man, what's going on inside his mind, and invite him into some conversation craft here on the Yours Truly podcast. So without further delay, I give you John Shraer, Becoming Human. Hi, this is Christian Baxter, and you're listening to Yours Truly, a place we go to think out loud. John. Oh,
Christian, how's it going?
it's good, man. It is good. All right, I'm just checking on a setting here. Okay, all right. Oops. Okay, I think we're good on the audio. All right, man. So, yeah, dude, you were at Symbolic World. You saw me there. I think I did recognize you when I saw your video. I was like, yeah, I think I saw this guy walk, passing him. It was a pretty small place. And your video, you decided I want to participate in something in this conversation or something. You mentioned your experience there, feeling maybe a little isolated in the midst of the space. Is that accurate? And then you mentioned me saying it didn't look like Christian was isolated or something like that. And I was like, well, let's we can't go back in time, but we could maybe change a little bit this going forward together. So I don't know, man.
Yeah, it was, I think I was looking forward to, like, after I got my tickets, I was kind of excited about potentially connecting with people. And the conversations I had were great while I was there. But it was more so like, oh, now after the conference is over, kind of, where do I go from here? And so kind of that feeling of isolation almost started after the conference ended.
Okay.
And so then I was like, well, I saw some of your videos and I was like, oh, it looks like he's making connections kind of in this space. And so I was like, well, maybe the next best thing I can do is start a video and maybe I'll make some connections that way. And here we are.
Yeah. So has there been anything else as far as like talking to people online about this stuff or?
Not too much. I mean, there's been people commenting and stuff, which is cool. Even I think in my initial video, I kind of mentioned some like questions I had and people would leave comments about their thoughts on it. So even just getting that little bit of like feedback and interaction is fun.
Yeah. Well, so what drew you to Symbolic World? What's that journey? What was your journey to get there?
Yeah, I mean, I've been kind of lurking in the space for a long time, just watching people, different videos and stuff. Although now it's a little hard because this little corner has gotten a little bit bigger, and so it's hard to keep up with everything. But yeah, I've just always been, I don't know, it's kind of kindred spirits in this, this little corner. And so then I had actually seen when they had a event in Canada and Chino and stuff too. But those just didn't work out. But I was kind of like, oh, maybe that could be, fun to go to, but probably not. And so then this one was much closer, and I had some work stuff going on, so I wasn't really sure if I was going to be able to make it, but sort of maybe a couple weeks before the actual event, I was like, okay, I think I can make some space and make it to this one. So I did, which I'm really glad I did. I loved going to it. But yeah, that's kind of how I ended up at the conference. And then I think while I was there was maybe something about just kind of like the spirit of the conference that really showed me sort of the potential of being more like participating more and connecting with people on a deeper level than just consuming content. And so it was actually while I was at the conference that I was like, okay, I'm going to try to figure out a way to participate in this more. Like I enjoy being around these people and kind of being in this sort of space. So yeah.
Yeah, that makes me think of two things. One, just on the end there, is Vesper Stampers kind of like pick up your pen and paper and go. And, you know, like there was a call to action. And I think that's real. And you did something, you know. You may not have put the icon up on, or the saint up on your, I don't know what church you go to, or if you go to church for like up on your fireplace like Richard Rowland was saying, but you said, well, maybe I'll start a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
So so yeah, you wanted to come play, figure that out. And another point on that, as I try to hold on to my first point, is that like you made mention of this little corner getting hard to keep up. And I mean, I think that's the case, even in the little time that I've spent in it, and as a participant, and as like even just one person, you're people making an hour or 45 minutes or 2 hour piece of content. It's like, well, how much of this can I really like, you know, hang on to? So I think that's a reality, and that's a part of the Dunbar number and problem and all that kind of stuff. But I think the other piece of that is doing what you're doing what I'm doing. It's like, well, instead of, you know, always trying to reach across or reach up, like to like say you do this for 2 months and you give a little time and energy to it, and it affords a few more conversations such as this or something, and then someone else reaches out to you, like you reach across or you reach down, and it's like you just don't play 100% the YouTube status game. You just play the play, you know? And so the other piece that I wanted to go back to, which was, well, was that the other piece, man? Let's see. I think I may have lost it already. Okay. Well, yeah, but that's, I think that's true. So tell me about, okay, the thing I wanted to go to was, okay, here it is. It's coming back. So yeah, you lurk. Well, what brought you into being this kind of, you're observing, I don't know, put some of the names out there, and what brought you into the interest for that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think like most people, probably the introduction was sort of Peterson. And then I was watching his stuff pretty early, I think probably 2016 or whatever. And then through him got introduced to Pageau and then Vervaeke and Paul VanderKlay. And so was just kind of following those. And there was a lot of, I don't know, like I've grown up in church, but there was always, and I'm a pretty like high in openness person. And so I've always been interested in discussing these types of ideas and stuff, but I'm also very like agreeable. And so it was kind of a fine line of how to like bring up these topics in a way that's not like, I don't want to put somebody in like a meaning or faith crisis or something, you know, trying to poke at their worldview. But I was also very interested in like, how do people come up with the beliefs that they have, and, you know, things that may seem like an inconsistency between what they believe and how they live, you know, just how are people thinking about these sorts of things. And this was the first kind of internet space that was talking about those things, and also, you know, kind of offered an alternative to sort of naturalism and showed spirituality, but not in the modern sort of context. And I definitely felt like there was an amount of that was missing in just my understanding of things. And so I think I was kind of drawn to it, and the more I got into it, the more excited about it I was. And so then as sort of this little corner started appearing and manifesting, it seemed like a lot of kindred spirits. And so that was kind of my intro into that world, I guess.
And so that, I mean, that sounds, it's interesting because that timeline matches up for me too. I don't know if you caught that in any of my other videos, but it's like, and the progression specifically, and of players, and also having, I had other things going on in my life that made it difficult, but even I feel like I haven't taken the big five, but open to ideas, love curiosity, but also conflict is hard for me. Very, very difficult. So like, you know, the minute, have you heard of Jordan Peterson? And, you know, any kind of like, you're just like, okay, well, I don't want to have this conversation, you know, like that kind of thing. And so finding a space where that that is kind of a trope, which you could tag onto any of this in a way, but it's like, because he is the most polarizing character for, various reasons, but like, the way I see it is this whole space flows down from, from what New Atheism did.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so if you said earlier, we're a couple years, you're just 3 or 4 years behind me. What was your faith looking like back in, 2007 or something? Like I think you said in there that you were a Christian. Did I hear that correctly?
I am a Christian.
Yeah. So like, what did that look like? I guess getting into college, that would have been about for you getting into college and all that stuff.
Yeah. So I actually was like, up until just a few years ago, actually, I was super involved in a church since like middle school, high school. Got met my wife there, got married, and all the way up until probably 3 years ago, was very involved in this church. And it was kind of, I don't know if you've ever heard of Word of Faith, but it was that sort of church, kind of charismatic, Pentecostal. If people aren't familiar with Word of Faith, it's kind of similar to like Bethel and some of those. So, took spiritual things very seriously, but we're also like very, very conservative and like not necessarily super high in openness. So definitely around, probably 2007 or 8, whatever the kind of late 2000 era, when the kind of new atheism stuff started growing. I was on YouTube, or whenever YouTube was big.
Yeah, basically coming out.
Yeah. But I started watching stuff, and it didn't necessarily, at that time, like shake my faith or anything. It was more just like, oh, people are missing something in the way they're talking about this. And for a long time, I would like try to reconcile, okay, how do I think about these things versus how they're talking about them, and how do I bridge that gap? And so I would think about those sorts of things for a long time. And then at some point, probably close to around Jordan Peterson time, maybe a couple years earlier, I did have probably a deconstruction, but not in the way, like, I think when a lot of people talk about deconstruction, to me, it sounds like deconversion. So
it's usually very political, more or less. To me, that's what it feels like.
Yeah. So it wasn't anything like that, but more so in the like kind of, John Vervaeke has like the metaphor of like you're seeing through glasses and then you take them off and look at them. And so it was kind of that, like, okay, I'm looking at my worldview and trying to understand like how I got there, and is there things that I think are not right about it. And so I sort of would say deconstructed in a sense, and then rebuilt it, and felt like it was stronger for having done it. But after that, there was a little bit of a disconnect between kind of my experience at church and how people were talking about things versus how I thought about them, which wasn't necessarily the reason that I don't go there anymore. But it was part of it, because it was sort of isolating not to be able to have these types of conversations because people weren't open to them. And part of that, again, was my agreeable nature. Like, there might've been some people who were open to it, but I didn't want to push any buttons trying to find out.
And that's what's interesting even about this space is like, well, your embodied life, that creates a whole nother challenge with those relationships. And even within your church, or your old church, which is like it's a sacred community, and how you navigate that, and how that, it is a different level than hopping on here, even though they might see this or could have, like, well, this was a conversation he was having with some weirdo on the internet, like there is a disembodied nature to this that creates a little more, I don't know if safety or freedom is the right word. It doesn't; those don't land exactly the same. But there is something different about. They get this whole other context, and it feels like I could have that conversation, where how to even start that conversation is a real trick or challenge, I think, because it sounds like when my experience, your experience, when you ingest, well, when you go to Jordan Peterson, when you go to the JP university for 5 or 7 years, like we don't get to study and take tests. And we don't get to have our study group and discuss it. Like it's just all right here. And TLC is kind of a commons. It's a university commons for those things, and that's one perspective that I have on it. So that makes total sense. So yeah, I mean, and if you don't mind sharing, what field are you in? What do you do work wise? What's kind of that world look like?
Yeah, I'm a software engineer,
Okay.
and actually around since 2013 to what is it 2024 now till 2021, I was actually like a stay-at-home dad and kind of raised my kids and stuff while they were preschool age, so I had more time then to watch a lot of
man.
Peterson and
That
YouTube stuff.
that's so real. Like, I mean, I know that's been Luke Thompson's journey. If you've picked up on if you watch Girl Country some and him, like, I was very isolated from 2016 for about 3 or 4 years, like night shift, hour commute to and from work. Like, I had a personal breakdown in my life. And so there was a part of isolation related to that. And so it's like, it's a similar type thing. And even when I've had conversations about this with my wife, and I think we were talking about Luke Thompson in particular because he is has been a stay-at-home person, like that she relates to that and understands like why that some of that is. And even I think Food Truck Emily too was like, I don't know if you've come across her, Paul highlighted her, something like there was a lot of during this parenting season, you have a lot of time to input, but there's not a lot of time to output, or it's all about the mommy, daddy, baby culture,
Yeah.
which for a 30-year-old person has its, I mean, it has its practical goodness, but it doesn't have its kind of like the yearnings of an intellectual person's like feeding that. So all that makes sense. So if you came to Symbolic World, you've been on this journey. What's church look like for you now, since you mentioned that change in your life?
It's been an interesting kind of journey, I guess. There was some stuff that happened in my church, and it, just I don't know if I want to get into all that now, but basically, just some stuff happened, and so we felt like it was time to go somewhere else, and it was right around the time of like me starting a new career and moving and all this other stuff. So it was kind of a good like just turning point in our life. So we moved and started a new job, all that sort of stuff. But then because I had been so plugged into that church, it was like, okay, I don't even know how, like, because it was also before I was an adult. I had been integrated in there. So now I was like, I don't even really know what it's like to look for a church or whatever. So we visited a few churches. We've gone to one kind of off and on. But it's weird to go from a really tight-knit community to then try to reintegrate yourself with a bunch of strangers, especially after you're an adult. So it's been interesting. And I think that's also probably part of the desire to interact with this little corner, because there's not that exchange of spiritual ideas in some ways, because you can't just go up to most strangers and dig into their spiritual journey and find out where they are and how they think. And so this is a nice way to kind of satisfy part of that, and also not. It's a lot to try to find a new church that meets all of your needs, including your intellectual and social needs and spiritual needs. And so my hope too is maybe taking a little bit of the burden from that to having this other outlet may make it slightly easier to find a good church.
Yeah, church. I think I have two things on that. I'll try to keep them both again. meeting needs, and then also the coming out of something that possibly was painful or traumatic a little bit on that scale somewhere. Sounds possible. And I've shared that that's been the case for me over the last year and a half. And well, yeah, somewhere around there. And also coming from a church that I participated in since high school. And there's this whole thing, I think some of it's in psychology now, but like call it like spiritual bypass. Yeah, well, don't go to church anymore. So it's just like, it's just church. So I'm just going to go to another church. No, but that's kind of what we think. It's just church. I just need to go find this church that maybe quote unquote meets my needs, which is another piece I want to think about on that. But you're leaving this embodied community, like long-term friendships that don't necessarily disappear, but that the relationship changes, the proximity changes, the frequency, and even the modes of worship, the embodied, the participating, and I'm not going to use all the Vervaeke words, but like you're leaving you're leaving your knowing of church. That isn't just you. Like there's this idea that, well, church is just me and God. Well, it's not. No. So that is a huge deal. And I think that we're kind of tricked in culture that it's just a consumatory thing that's like, oh, I just take myself and then I go consume church over here. So I would encourage you and your wife, I don't know how long it's been, but and I don't know what y'all have done, but if you haven't, to consider talking about grieving, like spending some time grieving that.
Yeah.
I'm not a therapist, but that's just, I've got to grieve a lot of things in my life, and it's helpful to kind of almost take the glasses off, like you were saying, and set it up there and kind of look at it and be like, what are the things that I'm grieving here? Because just because we're leaving for some bad reasons doesn't mean that there weren't good things that are lost,
Yeah, for sure. And that's been another thing is like, there are still tons of people I love in that church, and still a lot that I know I benefited from being there. So I don't feel like I'm resentful or anything like that. It's just sometimes it's time to move on, and or circumstances happen or whatever. But another part of that too is when you are integrated somewhere, there's a lot of stuff you don't have to think about because it's just already set, and then now when you're moving on somewhere else, it's like, okay, now you have to dig into how your theology relates to where you want to go and worship and all those things. And it's very interesting. I even did because there's so many Orthodox people in this space, I was like, oh, maybe I'll go visit an Eastern Orthodox church, and see how that is. And it was a wild experience in the sense that it made me realize how modern I am and how different it is from, the church I went to is very modern, kind of Pentecostal charismatic style. And so going from that to very traditional regimented liturgy and stuff was, very interesting. And so, even, there's an amount of just feeling lost in some sense of what's, reordering what's important and what you're looking for. And, and I don't know if it would be better to be way back in the day when there was one church in the community and you went there, and, or if it's nice to have so many choices, but it definitely makes it tricky in some ways.
Yeah, I've definitely thought about how I'm from a small town in Arkansas. And so 100 years ago, there were probably 4 churches, maybe more than, say 100. So it's 120 years. So 19, yeah. And that's, everybody's there. Everybody's there. Even if they are, you got the Episcopal and the Methodist and the Baptist or something, but it's wow, that's pretty wild to think about. It's almost hard to even comprehend that, but there is a goodness to that, but also then there's also, like you're saying, oh, are options better? And I would encourage, yeah, like when I hear that, because you mentioned this, where you can have your needs met, and just like seeing it where also you could meet needs.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you probably know that. That's real churchy, but it's like, we don't want to, I don't want to walk up in this place and be like, oh, I could bring something good here. But like,
Right.
but you can, not in like a prideful way, but like you bringing yourself and your family and who you are is like, it's not again, like you're just that idea that it's just like it's like, no, it's like, it's, I don't know if you can see that right, but like,
Yeah.
yeah. And you got to remember you're talking to a guy that was a pastor for a long time. So it's going to come out a little bit. So like, yeah, dude. So I guess I want to just like get back to the first connection that you had. You said my name, like I'm going to respond to that, like for better or for worse, whether that's narcissism or it's just reality. I'm like, oh, well, there was a real connection. Like you mentioned me. So there's something. It's like I have a personality type where I'm pretty extroverted. I've been going to stuff by myself since like church camp when I was 15, and I was the only guy from my church that went to this big state one, and it ended up being like my favorite thing that I went by myself. So like there's context to that, and I went to a lot of other conferences, and then ended up like leading music at conferences where it's just, I'm bringing me. I'm going to this place. I don't know any of these people, but I'm playing the music. So it's like, so there's that reality. Then there was also the fact that I kind of jumped into this TLC, I think kind of from out of nowhere, but like because of a certain skill set with like this gear and stuff, like I was able to kind of like navigate it and like get in and start playing quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of positive reinforcement with that. Like all of a sudden Paul's popping up a video, all of a sudden Grim Grizz is popping up. And I'm like, again, that's like dopamine.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, but I was like, just like, okay, because I had spent a long time relationally isolated as well. And for some of it for really good reasons. And some of that's changed in the last couple of years, but this conversation, whatever this conversation is, was one that was still kind of like, I have a few conversations partner. I'd say my father-in-law is a big part of this conversation partner. I have another friend I've talked about on here, kind of veiled in a way, but over years, he was a Catholic friend who came into my evangelical church, and we started having these conversations years ago. So, so what you were seeing, and then I like started having these podcasts, and then like some of these people, like two of them that I was having podcasts with were going to be at the conference. I didn't even know it. And then I was like, being a person who went like that size, I like led conferences, like I'm in this space, like, and I'm trying to deal with my own ambition and with my own, trying to follow something true, but also like, okay, well, I paid a lot of money. I'm going to go try to meet Jordan Peterson, damn it. Like, I'm like, he's right here. Like,
Yeah.
So like, there was just a lot of things going on in this person about that. And so I don't know. I just wanted to like give you, that's kind of a person you were seeing. I'm doing a live stream with Paul in the middle of the, like outside the VIP room, like giving a news report. Like I'm doing crazy stuff, man. I'm just, that's all really fun to me. And so, yeah, that's who you were seeing. Like, it wasn't just like, but a big part of it was what you picked up on, which was like, you started a channel, and then you say Christian, and then Christian's like, hey, let's talk. And then here you are. And then there'll probably be at least 10 or 15 people that watch this thing, as it happens or something. And it's like, and they'll be like, yeah, man, hit up this Discord or like, whatever, I don't know, stuff you already done. But there's also when you come out of lurkerdom, there's putting a name with a face and a personality that creates a more tangible person to engage with. And so that's, I don't know, that's just, I don't know, that's what you were seeing, and that may be weird, but yeah, I don't know, man.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think there is something odd about putting yourself out there on the internet and doing stuff, because there is an element of, I don't know, when you talk to somebody face to face, there's not any pretense or anything, or usually, I mean, there is a little bit, but it's different in that you're not totally controlling the way you're presenting to other people. And so that's one thing that was interesting about when I was doing my video is, and maybe I just am a overthinker, but it's like, okay, I am now presenting myself in a certain way. Does this feel authentic? Do I feel like I'm putting on some sort of air to try to get stuff? And it's a little bit of a game too, because it's like, okay, yeah, I saw you. I wanted to connect with other people. So I do kind of mention you. I don't know if you're going to watch it or not, but, and so you're kind of dancing and playing, trying to figure out what's acceptable, what's not, what is authentic, but is also sort of in the same way you go in public, you're always putting on some sort of a persona, but you don't want it to be in contradiction with who you feel like you really are. And so I don't know, just as a person who thinks about probably too much all these things, I'm very inside my own head sometimes. It's interesting to try to connect with people and also kind of feel out who they really are and all those sorts of things, which was another interesting thing about the conference. It was seeing people you've only seen online in person. One thing I really appreciated was like seeing Pageau be there. He seemed like a very humble person in his embodied form, and I really enjoyed, like, at the end of the conference, he brought his wife up and talked about her and was, basically in tears, how appreciative he was of her support and, being with him throughout his whole journey. And so there's elements of that you don't get online. So it's interesting to try to connect with people and feel out who they really are, but also, be authentic and, but present in a way that you still get to achieve the things you're trying to achieve or whatever. Yeah.
I think, there's a lot there. The authentic nature, playing the game, so I do these little video bumpers and I read this little intro because, like, I'm trying to play the podcast game. Like, I literally am. Like, I want to, like, I want to do that thing. That's,
yeah.
But someone could, like, oh, Christian's, he's trying to do that. It's like he's trying to be something that he's not or something. It's like, and then, I bought a nice camera and I have, like, production gear and all this stuff. It's like, okay, well, like, Christian's not authentic because he's using, like, he doesn't just use his laptop mic, so he's not authentic. Well, for a guy that has spent, like, thousands of dollars and thousands of hours on audio in his life, like, what am I being authentic to if I can't, like that's being very authentic to me. So I think that sometimes authenticity is, we say that we perceive authenticity as lowbrow, or like, oh, this is me coming at you, like, whatever. So no, like you were saying, the real authenticity is like being okay with being yourself in a way. And I think so there's that, but then there's the part about putting on the mask, like, appropriately so. Like, I'm not going to say certain people's names. I'm not going to talk about life the exact same way that I would if I'm sitting down in a bar at Symbolic World with Grim Grizz or Nate Heil, and having a conversation. Yeah. However, because of this and these nodal networks that I put on here, like, those conversations came a lot quicker and a lot easier, and with a certain level of trust already ratcheted up, which is what you saw, like, and so say you and I meet 6 months from now, like, we're already going to have, there's like a piece of that, there's like a value hierarchy in this digital thing that we're actually learning about in real time, about where this fits into real life. That was several of those that was a conversation I had with Justin Wells and Justin's Morning Coffee and Pete from Strange Theology. Like that was the big part of our conversation, was this thing of like digital to flesh and blood, and the difference therein. So yeah, and getting on saying like, well, I am going to be, it is easy to overthink it. And I do think it's important to think about it, because I mean, like, even when I was at Symbolic World, like I was like, I mean, I posted up a video and a bootleg part of the conference that people at the conference then watched. And I was in the bathroom with a guy, and he was like, hey, Christian Baxter, I just saw that video you just posted of the conference. And I was like, oh yeah. And then I haven't told this story out here yet. This is very embarrassing. I was like, oh yeah, you should check out my channel. I've got this recent podcast with Jordan Hall. He's actually here. And I kid you not, around the corner of the stall, the potty flushes, the toilet flushes, and Jordan Hall walks around. He's like, hey. And I'm like, wow, I feel really embarrassed, because what was I doing there? I don't know if I know what I was doing there. And I was like, was I like trying to like show off to this guy, or was I trying to like say, hey, yeah, get to know me, or get to see this thing, or this was a really cool conversation that I had with this person that's really interesting. Like maybe it was all of it, you know, but like either way, I was so embarrassed. Like, but, and I talked to him about it later. I was like, yeah, I mean, that's thinking about what you're doing is healthy to the extent that you're trying to notice your intention. Yeah, and being honest about it, I think, and it's hard to do that, but it's important, I think, if you're going to try to live out what the things that we hear at these places are from people like Jordan Peterson or Paul VanderKlay. Like, I think that it is important to be honest about your intention.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that is how I came across you too, was the Jordan Peterson Q&A takeover video.
I've since I took it down. Grim Grizz gave me hell about it on his channel. He's like, what's Agent Baxter trying to do here? And I was like, and this one girl, I think she's Orthodox. I think it was a girl. She wrote me a treatise about my sin on there. And so I was like, yeah. And I was talking to my wife about it, and it was like, because Paul said, if it goes viral, we take it down. But it's, some people watch it, that's fine. So I was like, at 50,000 views, I was like, what? I think it's time to take it down.
Yeah. When I first saw it, I was like, who filmed this? Just from the thing. And then I was like, man, why didn't I think of that?
Well, I mean, because probably it was, I was kind of on. I was like, I felt like I was documenting this thing live, like because there were people that really wanted to be there, and I was getting a lot of attention for it. Like, it was both and I had both those feelings at the same time. So.
Yeah. But I mean, I think it was fair, especially it was fun that you put it out like while you were there, It would have been different had you put it out afterwards, but like that gave you a chance to connect with people.
Yeah, it did. So you saw that coming up in your YouTube feed, and then you're like, okay, well, this guy's doing something weird. But yeah, man. So, your channel, Becoming Human, what's that? Where's that come from? You may have said it on there. I can't remember.
I don't know if I did or not, but yeah, it like I said, I was partly inspired while I was at the conference. But I just think there's a lot in our culture that kind of makes us disassociated from our humanity in some way. And so a lot of it is trying to reclaim that has kind of been lost to modernity and who we are as people. Because like I said, I'm a very modern person. Like I'm, very logical. I'm a software engineer, so I'm on computers all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And even just as a Protestant, like we don't have the same respect for tradition and things that some of the more traditional branches of Christianity do. And so there's just an element of trying to reclaim that. And even kind of in the tradition that I was in, there was a little bit of that, like almost looking down on your humanity in the sense of like, okay, with Adam and Eve, there was perfection. And then in the end, everything will be perfect. But here and now, it's almost like we're just trying to get by until the end times or whatever, or until you die. And I don't think we would be here having this experience if there wasn't a deeper purpose to it than, oh, it was better before and it'll be better after, but kind of just skip over the middle part when this is the only time we'll experience this. So it's trying to remember that and remember that there is something important and beautiful about being a human. And so trying to reach and reclaim that. So that's kind of the idea behind why I named it that.
I'm with you, dude. That my family was charismatic till fourth grade, and then Southern Baptist, and so there was within that culture. I'll even say this because my dad, he told this to our old pastor that I was on staff with before all that went down, and he said, we really were the living by faith because we thought all this was just gonna, burn, go away, whatever, and I was really struck when he said that, and I think that there's a weird type of nihilism involved in that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's implicit. Of course, there's a purpose with what we're doing. Like you said, you mentioned it in that explanation. Like, no, I mean, there is a hope at the end. But there's this weird intermittent nihilism where a lot of things just don't matter, especially about our humanity, the culture, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
And that does a lot to you psychologically. This kind of ways that you make decisions about the future. And so, like you said, there's people in that space that you love, and it is a part of the faith. It's a part of the family, but I've been pushing back against that in my life for a long time now. It feels like and here we are. This whole thing is kind of the big meta concept is the meaning crisis. So if none of this matters, and even to a point where there's been some like people in this conversations, some of the live streams with like Grail Country, and that Paul's mentioned T-Grog, and he's been an atheist that's come into the space, kind of troll in, but also hang in, is even when you said something beautiful about humanity, it takes me to the idea of what humanism is. And like that, I think a big rejection of Christianity with new atheism is related to the very thing that we're talking about. And then the idea to like value humanity was a response to that, because you can't just not have any purpose, right? Mm-hmm. But then it's like, that slides you back into the next question of why.
Yeah.
It's just the Enlightenment. Okay, well, that doesn't seem to square. Tom Holland's poking holes in that stuff now. It's like, so I'm right there tracking with that, and so you like, that is a nice connection between becoming human and coming to a place where we can think out loud about it, like I'm with you on that. So you tried on Orthodoxy for a little bit, or you once or twice or whatever, and then like you realize, man, how modern I feel Isn't that funny with the John Harris thing that we did at the very beginning? It's like, how modern or
Mhm.
how ancient are you? You know,
Yeah. Do
you
you remember
find
what your
that
score was?
what?
Do you remember what your score was?
I think 11.
Okay. I think I was like 8 or something. So,
Yeah, yeah. And I've had more probably been more in contact with the ancient world and worship than you have in
mhm.
my through my marriage and stuff. And so, um, in the journey and ministry that I was on, but yeah, I mean, I just today I released a conversation I had with Lance Cleaver. He's a Grail Country moderator guy, and we talked about the divine liturgy versus modern worship, or actually a house church worship liturgy. But that conversation is one I think I'm still going to be having on here, which you hit on it. You know, with what's going on there between that experience of like the thing that hasn't felt like it's changed in 1500 years and your thing that is
Mhm.
changing every 6 months or more, you know, with the new
Yeah.
song or whatever. I don't know. How's that hit you? How, you know, where do you think are you trying to, the place that y'all have kind of been visiting, where is it, what's its culture and feel like with it?
Yeah. It's a Baptist church that's near where we live, and it's quite a bit bigger than the church we came from.
Mm-hmm.
So that also creates some potential problems of trying to like get connected and integrated. I think they do have like small groups and stuff, but it's a weird, like, you got to step out a little bit and trust and have some faith that stuff will be there, but also, you know, if you've had different types of experiences at churches, it's hard to know what to expect, and um, you don't want to commit too early and then pull back, especially if you are contributing something. You don't want to uh, be a detriment to people because you decide it's not for you.
Mm-hmm.
But you also you'll never really be connected if you don't put yourself out there to some extent. So just trying to figure stuff like that out, where would be a good place for us to connect. um, One thing that I because you may have had more experience or thought about this kind of stuff more, but one thing I'm been thinking about is even the traditional churches, like, before. So kind of the church history view is like before the big schism, it was all one church. But in my mind, and this is probably just, Protestant young kid who didn't think about it until recently, but um, in Acts and, throughout the New Testament, the churches they had there, I always imagined were like little house churches. They would go to these different places, and it was just a few people worshiping together. And then, if you talk to Pageau or whoever, like, we've been doing, this divine liturgy with icons and stuff for basically forever. And so I don't know when that leap happened from whatever, a bunch of Jewish people realizing that what they were doing was turning into something different and getting together and worshiping, when that got formalized and turned into an actual, you know, process that they went through, and then eventually had the schism and then the Reformation and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think that is kind of a romantic view of the Acts New Testament church. Listen, I'm gonna shoot from the hip on this.
Go for
I'm pretty sure that, you know, Peter, like they were meeting at the temple.
it. Mm-hmm.
That's not a house church.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I mean, they
that's
definitely.
really all I'll like put onto that. But that like,
Sure.
and then um the other piece that I'll attach to it is like what then happened. You know, there was persecution, there was tearing down of the temples and diaspora and of Christianity, but even so maybe then there was a type of house church, but all that was going to be informed by a type of historical liturgy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we want to place this kind of like stripped down version of Chinese house church onto what they were doing, but like it wouldn't have probably played out like that. Even when, you know, Paul's talking about food sacrificed to idol, like this whole, there's like all sorts of tradition built in there that are probably implicit that, if you talk to other historical scholars that have way better, not other, if you talk to a historian, they're going to have like way better, I just think that that's one thing that I think is kind of, Ananias and Sapphira, when they're struck down, like that's not at a house church,
Yeah.
like that's all happening in Acts, and the stoning of Stephen and like all that stuff was happening like around the temple. And so I think that would be an interesting place to maybe start to to consider what worship might have looked like in that context, So, but again, it's not like, well, what do you do if I think that these things are nested in a hierarchy of action and in a hierarchy of participation that we aren't always able to claim at certain times, certain seasons, certain, years or something too. So that would just be,
Yeah. Yeah. It's just interesting to think about. And I don't know. I guess I don't know what your current church situation is, but how was it transitioning from somewhere you had been for a long time to going somewhere else and starting over?
Yeah, it's a little different. I'll have you to answer that. It probably on the outside looks like a church split. So,
Okay.
and I'm with a community of people, it's probably a little bit more complex within that. And it is in a house, but we're like doing like a pretty formalized liturgy in a house. So, that probably doesn't fit any of those categories, but yeah, man. So I probably got to go here in a minute, but like, do you have any other like closing thoughts or whatever?
No, other than just this was fun, and I appreciate you connecting, and like, I feel like you were very hospitable and like, here, a person who has no idea what they're doing, connect with me, come join me, have a conversation.
Because I do know what I'm doing, right? All right. Well, dude, it's everybody. This is John Shraer on Becoming Human. Check out his channel. He's got a few videos up, and I'm gonna hit this bumper, man. We'll close it out backstage. All right.
All right. Thanks again.
Yeah. Hi, this is Christian Baxter, and you're listening to Yours Truly, a place we go to think out loud.